Several of the movie scenes that we can't stop citing weren't even intended to exist. Chaos often gave rise to some of the most famous sequences in cinematic history. Misbehaving performers, malfunctioning equipment, on-set mishaps, and last-minute ideas that transformed decent films into memorable ones. Visionary filmmakers didn't meticulously plan these iconic moments. Instead, they were joyful accidents, spontaneous dialogue, and snap choices that somehow managed to catch lightning in a bottle. Here are 20 iconic movie moments that were never supposed to happen, but thank God they did, including bloody noses that continued rolling and objects that broke down throughout cinematic history. Number 1. The Bloody Proposal, Chinatown, 1974. I said I want the truth. Jack Nicholson's inability to manage his fury led to one of the most unsettling scenes in film. Director Roman Polanski wanted Nicholson to give Faye Dunaway a little smack during the heated debate between Jake Gitz and Evelyn Mulwray in Chinatown. Rather, Nicholson overreacted and struck Dunaway so forcefully that blood was drawn from her nose. Instead of cutting, Polanski continued to film as Dunaway, visibly shocked and in agony, made her heartbreaking confession: "She's my sister and my daughter." The actual blood streaming down her face added to the scene's emotional violence, producing a chilling image that encapsulated the noir brutality of the movie. Following the take, Dunaway allegedly yelled at Nicholson and Polanski in a fit of rage. However, the video was too potent to ignore. One of the most startling scenes in the movie was the bloody slap. It was made more eerie by the fact that the actress's suffering went beyond her acting. Number 2. You Talking to Me? Taxi Driver. Are you talking to me? You talking to me? The only line in Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver screenplay was, "Travis talks to himself in the mirror." No conversation, no guidance. Robert De Niro took a simple hint and turned it into a film classic. De Niro stepped in front of the mirror and started improvising while the cameras rolled. He was inspired by a Bruce Springsteen performance he had previously seen, in which the singer questioned the audience, "You talking to me?" in between songs. On spot. De Niro penned the movie's most famous line, "You talking to me? Could you let me know if you're speaking to me?" Scorsese was so taken aback by what he was seeing that he failed to call cut, allowing De Niro to continue his spontaneous monologue for as long as possible. Well, I'm the only one here because a filmmaker trusted the actor enough to leave the screenplay blank, and sequence not only helped establish Travis Bickle's persona, but also became one of the most referenced scenes in movie history. Number 3. The Dress Blowing Up, The 7-Year Itch, 1955. Oh, can you feel the underground breeze? Isn't that tasty? Hundreds of astonished bystanders contributed to the creation of one of Hollywood's most famous pictures. It was originally intended to be a brief picture with minimal exposure when Billy Wilder created the iconic moment in which Marilyn Monroe leans over a subway grate, her white dress billowing skyward as a passing train sends it billowing skyward. "Dress blows up slightly" was how the screenplay put it, but what transpired made movie history. With hundreds of onlookers and journalists observing, Wilder turned the straightforward shot into a media event on September 15, 1954, by shooting on Lexington Avenue, New York. Monroe's dress didn't simply fly up a little when she stood over the grate, it soared up repeatedly, giving rise to the now famous picture. The public show so infuriated Monroe's then-husband, Joe DiMaggio, who was on set that day, that he stormed out. Only weeks later, their already tumultuous marriage came to an end, in part because of this episode. The video footage was gentler compared to the promotional photographs from the session, which went on to become more renowned. In the end, the loudness from the New York throng rendered the original audio useless, forcing Wilder to reshoot the sequence on a closed Hollywood set. A director's decision to convert a normal picture into an impromptu marketing campaign turned what started as a simple visual jest into the iconic image of Monroe's career, and maybe the most well-known single frame in cinematic history. Number 4. Here's Johnny, The Shining, 1980. Here's Johnny. Because he didn't get the humor, a British director almost removed the movie's most well-known phrase. The screenplay called for Jack Nicholson to yell, "Wendy, I'm home," during The Shining's famed door-chopping sequence. However, Nicholson used his improvisational abilities to mimic Ed McMahon's famous Tonight Show introduction of Johnny Carson and yelled, "Here's Johnny." Being British and used to American television, Kubrick was initially perplexed by the illusion. Before American crew members explained its cultural importance, he almost severed the line. Kubrick retained it in the final edit after realizing how well it combined the humorous and the ominous. Because an actor grabbed a random TV catchphrase during a moment of inspiration, the improvised moment became the film's hallmark sequence and one of the most iconic phrases in cinematic history. Number 5. The Flying Champagne Cork, Casablanca, 1942. One of the funniest moments in film was caused by a malfunctioning prop. When Claude Rains' character, Captain Renault, shuts Rick's Cafe in Casablanca, he orders champagne before saying the famous line, "I'm shocked to discover that there's gambling here." According to the screenplay, Rains was supposed to open the champagne as he spoke. While shooting, Rains struggled with the cork and unintentionally threw it off camera with a loud pop. Looking toward the sound, he improvised without missing a beat. Directing, "Oh please, Major, round up the usual suspects." Director Michael Curtiz immediately recognized that the fortunate accident enhanced the scene's humor and irony. Because an actor skillfully concealing a prop accident, the champagne cork incident remained in, providing the ideal visual punctuation to one of the most memorable scenes in the movie. Number 6. Here's Looking at You, Kid, Casablanca, 1942. Card games in between takes gave us the most romantic phrase in film history. "Here's looking at you, kid." The draft did not include Humphrey Bogart's legendary goodbye to Ingrid Bergman. It originated from their connection off-camera, in which Bogart taught Bergman how to play poker in between sequences. He used the popular gambling idiom of the day, "Here's looking at you, kid," whenever she got a nice hand. Bogart spontaneously used the term when Rick bids Ilsa farewell during the Paris flashback sequence. The director, Michael Curtiz, maintained the sentence because he understood how well it encapsulated their connection. Bogart then repeated it in the departure scene at the airport, making it one of the most remembered lines in the movie. What started as a light-hearted conversation during card games in between takes developed into the heart of one of the most romantic tales in Hollywood history, while establishing a language theme that connected the couple's previous and current separations. The improvised statement effectively encapsulated Rick's persona as a gambler in both life and love. Number 7. I'm Walking Here, Midnight Cowboy, 1969. "I'm walking right here, I'm walking right here." Dustin Hoffman was almost struck by a genuine New York taxi, which made cinematic history. To create a genuine city environment, filmmaker John Schlesinger opted to use concealed cameras while shooting on a busy intersection in New York City. Actors Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight had to deal with actual traffic in Manhattan as the producers couldn't afford to shut down the roadway. Unaware that a movie was being filmed, a genuine taxi driver ran a light during their talk and almost hit Hoffman in the middle of the scene. Hoffman smacked the cab's hood and yelled his now famous statement, still perfectly in character as Ratso Rizzo, "I'm walking here, I'm walking right here." Hoffman skillfully returned to conversation with Voight after the first outburst, saying, "Actually, that ain't a bad way to pick up insurance." Schlesinger was impressed by Hoffman's fast thinking and decided to include the unscripted exchange in the movie. The near accident offered American film one of its most distinctively New York moments and better encapsulated the wild spirit of New York than any scripted picture could have. Number 8. The Real Slap, Gone with the Wind, 1939. Vivien Leigh's most genuine response was a result of a director's covert directive. Director Victor Fleming adopted a contentious stance after numerous unsatisfactory takes of the encounter between Scarlett O'Hara, Vivien Leigh, and Rhett Butler, Clark Gable. Disappointment with the scene's lack of emotional impact, Fleming surreptitiously gave Gable the order to give Leigh a genuine smack on the subsequent take without alerting her. Leigh was unprepared for the real smack that Gable gave her when the cameras rolled again. The moment achieved the emotional effect Fleming had been looking for thanks to her stunned, pained response, which was a combination of real anguish and a professional resolve to remain in character. After shooting, Lee was incensed because she felt deceived by both Fleming and Gable. Decades later, viewers still find the moment of real emotional violence frightening because the film was so potent that it kept it in the final edit. These days, the contentious directorial style would be utterly inappropriate. Nevertheless, it produced one of the most genuine responses in vintage film, a brief blurring of the boundaries between acting and reality. Number 9. The Broken Glasses. It's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart's most heartbreaking sequence was made possible by a lost prop. Stewart was meant to go into his pocket, discover his daughter's flower petals, and start sobbing as George Bailey hits his breaking point at the bar. However, before the shoot, the prop guy neglected to place the petals in Stewart's pocket. Stewart's expression changed to one of absolute bewilderment as he dug into his empty pocket. Director Frank Capra chose to let the cameras roll instead of calling a cut. Stewart, who had just returned from World War II and was dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, used an improvised breakdown to express his true emotional fragility. He started crying hysterically, which was a far more dramatic response than was planned. He wasn't acting when he said, "I'm not very good at this." Stewart was admitting that he was losing control. Keeping the cameras running, Capra captured what many people believe to be the most genuine emotional collapse in vintage film. A prop man's mistake made room for real emotion to surface, which led to the most impactful scene in the movie, and maybe Stewart's best on-screen performance. Number 10. The Mirror Smash. Citizen Kane, 1941. The most violent outburst in film was driven by actual blood and suffering. Orson Welles was meant to meticulously destroy his wife's bedroom in a controlled anger after Charles Foster Kane finds out she's left him. Instead, the site was changed into something far more unsettling by a real accident. Welles suffered excruciating agony when his hand became stuck in a cabinet drawer during shooting. Rather than halting, Welles transformed the real suffering into uncontrollable rage, destroying the set in a way that was considerably more destructive than anticipated. When he got into the dressing table mirror, he shattered it so hard that his palm got severely injured and blood started to pour out. As Welles, now in absolute agony and rage, stumbled past the camera with blood streaming from his cut wrist, cinematographer Greg Toland continued to record. After the action ended, stitches were needed for the injuries. Kane's breaking point was effectively represented by the moment of severe emotional and physical intensity generated by the unforeseen damage and actual harm. What started as an accident turned into one of the most realistic portrayals of anger in film, all because a novice filmmaker refused to deviate from the norm in the face of real suffering. Number 11. Pottery Wheel Scene, Ghost, 1990. A scenario hastily planned and featured borrowed music evolved into a famous love moment. Director Jerry Zucker discovered that Ghost was missing a sequence that established the strong physical bond between Sam, Patrick Swayze, and Molly, Demi Moore, when production was already in progress. There was no appropriate scene in the screenplay to give Sam's death any emotional resonance. The pottery wheel scenario was a desperate idea conceived by Zucker and screenwriter Bruce Joel Rubin. They had nothing ready, but they required music for the sequence. Unchained Melody was chosen only because it was easily accessible, and the property owner just so happened to have a Righteous Brothers cassette in his vehicle. What started as a hasty fix for a storyline issue became the movie's pivotal scene, inspiring many parodies and permanently associating pottery with sensuality in popular culture. The interim soundtrack turned out to be so flawless that it became inseparable from the movie. One of the most iconic love scenes in film was born out of an afterthought to resolve a plot point, demonstrating that often the most fantastic ideas are the ones you have to hunt for at the last minute. Number 12. I'll Have What She's Having, When Harry Met Sally, 1989. An old woman's one-liner redeemed a moment that almost ended too quickly. I'll have what she's having. Sally's fictitious orgasm and Harry's humiliated response marked the initial conclusion of the screenplay for the well-known deli scene. The primary protagonists were awkwardly silent, with neither a punchline nor a last remark from another client. The audience roared with amusement when Estelle, the 70-year-old mother of filmmaker Rob Reiner, proposed a read-through of the screenplay. After Meg Ryan's performance, an older lady client could deadpan, "I'll have what she's having." One of comedy's most flawless button moments was created when Reiner cast Estelle to deliver the line herself because he was so sure of his mother's comedic sensibility. An old woman's surprising comedic timing turned a situation that would have concluded with Ryan's performance into a memorable one. Proof that sometimes the finest ideas come from people outside the writer's room, and sometimes from your mom, is the improvised statement, which is often listed as one of the top movie lines by the American Film Institute. Number 13. The Flying Fruit, The Godfather, 1972. The most vibrant violence in the movie was unintentionally produced by scattered produce. In an attempt to add visual interest to the backdrop, a prop guy impulsively chose to distribute fruit on a display stand close to the battle just before shooting Sonny Corleone's assault on his brother-in-law Carlo. During the altercation, James Caan foolishly knocked down the fruit stand by using the lid of a trash can as a weapon. A striking visual contrast to the heinous violence was produced by the bright oranges, apples, and lemons that flew over the screen. Francis Ford Coppola, the director, immediately recognized the improvement in the scene's visual impact with the addition of color bursts. One of the most striking aspects of the movie was the flying fruit, a fortunate accident that transformed a routine battle scene into a visually stunning one. One of the most subtly recurring themes in the movie was also unintentionally produced by the strewn-about produce. Throughout the trilogy, oranges appear in several sequences preceding character deaths, serving as a visual warning sign of impending disaster. This was all accidental. Number 14. The Dueling Banjos, Deliverance, 1972. A non-musician's hands produced the most eerie musical moment in the movie. Billy Redden's unique look was the only reason director John Boorman chose him to play the banjo in the well-known musical duel. Boorman didn't find out that Redden couldn't play a single note on the banjo until after casting. Boorman came up with an alternative to recasting. Behind Redden was a genuine musician who was fingering the banjo strings while putting his arms through the boy's sleeves. Redden, meantime, was instructed to move his plucking hand roughly in time with the final piece of music. The sight had a strange, frightening aspect because of this complex workaround. In a manner that no traditional music scene could have, Redden's odd finger gestures and expressionless face contributed to the sequence's sense of rural danger. Casting error unintentionally produced the ideal tone setter for the movie, creating the eerie, unsettling ambiance that pervaded the entire narrative. Number 15. The Glass Cut, Django Unchained, 2012. Leonardo DiCaprio cut his hand open and used his blood to continue the action after saying, "Lay your palm flat on the tabletop." When DiCaprio's character, Calvin Candy, becomes angry during the dinner altercation, he unintentionally slams his hand into a crystal glass, seriously injuring his palm. Real blood started to flow from the cut right away. Rather than halting, DiCaprio remained entirely true to his role, integrating the injury into his performance. In a moment of spontaneous malice, he smeared blood on Kerry Washington's face as he proceeded with his diatribe. Recognizing the moment's unadulterated authenticity, director Quentin Tarantino continued to shoot. The take with DiCaprio's actual blood made the final cut, but the injury required medical attention immediately after the scene was finished. Because an actor refused to deviate from character despite experiencing real pain, the unplanned injury turned an already tense scene into something viscerally unsettling. Number 16. The Mistaken Restaurant, Goodfellas, 1990. You're just amusing. Funny how? It's the way you tell the story and everything. What's funny about it? The most tense part of the movie was a horrifying true story from Joe Pesci's life. The funny how Nicholas Pileggi's script and early drafts lacked the sequence. When Pesci shared a true story from his early years with director Martin Scorsese during rehearsals, it came to light. Pesci almost lost his life after inadvertently insulting a wise man he worked with at a restaurant by telling him he was funny. Scorsese saw right away that the story had the potential to convey the razor-sharp uncertainty of life in the mob. Instead, he had Pesci and Ray Liotta improvise the entire exchange, with only Pesci knowing how the scene would play out, rather than writing formal dialogue. Generally, the other actors' response to Pesci's unexpected threats were genuine. A perfect example of how easily things could turn deadly in mob circles. The improvised scene, with its stomach-turning transition from friendship to danger and back again, became one of the most tense moments in cinema history. More effectively than any scripted scene, casual anecdote told during rehearsal encapsulated the essence of gangster life. Number 17. You're gonna need a bigger boat. Jaws, 1975. A common joke about cheap producers turned into the most quoted line in movies. You're gonna need a bigger boat. Every time something went wrong during the tumultuous Jaws production, crew members would mockingly remark, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," a reference to the subpar support vessel the producers had supplied for the ocean shoot. The script called for Chief Brody, Roy Scheider, to react in shock when he first sees the shark, but it didn't specify any dialogue. Scheider improvised the now-famous line, recalling the crew's inside joke. Steven Spielberg immediately recognized how well it captured the audience's collective response to finally seeing the massive shark, as well as Brody's stunned incredulity. The inane crew grumble turned into the movie's catchphrase and one of the most recognizable lines in cinema. Number 18. The Improvised Interrogation. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. No one warned Jodie Foster that Anthony Hopkins wouldn't blink. Ham-handed segue into your questionnaire, it won't do. Hopkins decided on the spur of the moment to deliver his lines without blinking when filming The Silence of the Lambs, which gave Hannibal Lecter a terrifyingly reptilian appearance. Hopkins came up with the strategy on his own. Director Jonathan Demme had not given him any instructions. Foster's growing uneasiness throughout the scene was real. Hopkins' unwavering gaze was genuinely unsettling to her. Another improvisation that wasn't in the screenplay was Hopkins' use of unsettling hissing sound following his statement about consuming a census-taker's liver. Despite only having 16 minutes of screen time, Hopkins was able to create one of the most memorable villains in movie history thanks to these spontaneous decisions that became essential to Lecter's character. Decades later, the character is still regarded as the definitive serial killer in film, mainly due to the actor's avant-garde decisions made up on the first day of filming. Number 19. The Unscripted Slap, The Princess Bride, 1987. What is it? On your right hand, you have 6 fingers. Someone was searching for you. The actors got real retribution after an unintentional hit. Christopher Guest unintentionally struck Cary Elwes with real force during a sword fight during the filming of Wesley's confrontation with Count Rugen, causing obvious pain. Rob Reiner, the director, admired the genuine response and pondered whether it could be duplicated for Wesley's moment of retaliation. Instead of miming the action authentically, Elwes chose to slap Guest in the scene where Wesley delivers his line. That was just to the left of where my heart would be. Guest's reaction to the unexpected force was a perfectly natural mix of shock, pain, and fear. Elwes later acknowledged that he struck Guest more forcefully than was necessary as a small form of retaliation for the earlier pain, turning what had started as an accidental blow into a deliberate one. One of the most satisfying scenes of villainous retribution in the movie was achieved through its actual impact. Number 20. The Briefcase Contents, Pulp Fiction, 1994. We have a lighting problem presented us with the most contentious mystery in cinema. One practical issue that Quentin Tarantino had to deal with during the filming of scenes in which Jules and Vincent opened Marcellus Wallace's briefcase was how to give the actors' faces a warm glow. What was in the case was never made clear in the script because Tarantino hadn't made up his mind. The answer? An orange light bulb was inserted into the case by the property master. As a light-hearted allusion to the devil, the combination lock was set to 666. It was merely a practical solution to a lighting issue. No deeper meaning was intended. One of the most enduring mysteries in cinema was created by this technical workaround. Fans have long speculated about the contents of the briefcase, including nuclear material, soul-selling transactions, and even Wallace's exhumed soul. The reality? It was merely a light bulb that appeared attractive on film. The most captivating cinematic moments are occasionally produced because a director never bothered to decide at all, rather than as a result of meticulous planning. We never forgot it, even though they didn't write or plan it. A moment becomes immortal because of this. From DiCaprio's bleeding hand to Marilyn's flowing gown, the most memorable moments in movies frequently arose from mayhem. A prop that was forgotten, a joke misinterpreted, a real slap, an actor was almost struck by a real taxi. These lightning-fast moments serve as a reminder that despite the careful planning and word-for-word crafting of directors and writers, sometimes the magic of a film occurs when everything goes wrong. For example, when actors forget lines and improvise better ones, when equipment malfunctions and unintentionally creates beauty, or when genuine pain, surprise, or inspiration turn good scenes into iconic ones. The next time you watch a classic movie, keep in mind that the lines you can't stop quoting didn't always originate in the writer's room. Instead, they came about naturally from the lovely chaos that is filmmaking. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon